This video is designed to give you some tips and tricks on how to earn full credit on the rough draft of your resume. So in this video, again, you're going to get some tips and tricks on really how to get started if you don't have a resume right now at all. Then if you do have your current resume, how to either refine or update that. And then some, again, items that you'll need to follow to earn full credit on this assignment. So just sort of broadly explained how to earn full credit. So it really needs to be apparent that you watch this video. So essentially your resume should be updated according to some of the things that I mentioned in this video. So for example, if you have your high school education on your resume, I make it pretty clear when we go over your education section that you should remove your high school education from your resume and why. So if your high school education is still on your resume, you may lose points for that. And there are some other things throughout the video that I will emphasize to make sure that you earn full credit on your resume. And earning full credit on your resume means your resume is started and polished enough to so that I can guide you to make it even better and you're fully ready to submit that resume when you've graduated, when you want to apply for a job. So your resume also needs to be one page. And you might be thinking to yourself, I might be the exception. And I do have students that come to me and say, I'm the exception. And sometimes I say, here's how you're not, and here's how to make your resume one page. You may have this great two-page resume, and I can tell you from feedback from many employers in our area that tend to hire our students, sometimes that second page doesn't even get read. And that pains me when I see a second page, or sometimes a third, or sometimes a fourth page on your resume, and it goes in the garbage simply because someone doesn't have time to read it. But you have great skills that you want to emphasize. So this video also explains how to do that. I give you some templates and some words of advice, some formatting instructions, things like that on how to keep your resume to one page. If you really, after watching this video, if you really feel you're a two-pager, please let me know before you submit your assignment. Let's double check it. Let's go through it. I've definitely had those exceptions, but let me tell you, normally you've been a professional for quite some time, and that's the reason why you have a two-page resume, and then it's perfectly acceptable to have that two-page resume. I have a two-page resume. So I'm not opposed to it, but I think most students, I would say 90 to 95% or more, can do a one-page resume. Also, I need your resumes in a Microsoft Word format. So this is a rough draft of your resume. So if you turn in a PDF, which a lot of students like to turn in a PDF of their resume because they know that the formatting will kind of stick. In general, Blackboard leaves the formatting. I don't grade your resume based on the preview that you see when you upload your assignment to Blackboard. That would be a mistake because it makes you've seen it, it makes the formatting all wonky. All instructors that grade your resumes, including myself, we open that document up. But sometimes you have things that we can help you and show you how to fix on your resume, but we can't do that if it's in a PDF. I can't fix things in a PDF. I can only fix things if they're in a format where I can open them up and edit them. So oftentimes you'll get a video feedback, or sometimes we even meet either face-to-face or via virtual, like a video. And I go through how to make some changes with you. And I, again, can only do that if you submit it using Word. So all of you have a free copy of Word. I also can't read things that you've saved in a Macintosh editor. So if I get a file that I can't read, I don't have a Macintosh computer. I don't have access to a Macintosh computer. So please make sure that you submit it using Word. That's expected. All right, so let's talk about what your resume should look like. And this is just kind of a general overview, and then we'll kind of go through each section of your resume. It won't take that long, and by the end of this video, you'll have a really good idea of really how to start from scratch and how to look at your resume that might be a current resume, existing resume, in a different light. So again, make sure your resume is one page. Leave off your high school diploma information. All of you have college, some college. That means you have to have a high school diploma. It's kind of old school to leave a high school diploma on your resume. So take that information off. Leaving your high school information on your resume also tells somebody exactly how old you are, for the most part, right? So if you say you graduated from Madison area schools in the year 2005 or something like that, they know how old you are. They know you were about 18 when you graduated. So don't let people know or be able to guess your age by putting your high school diploma information on your resume. You don't really want to put information on your resume that allows people to sort of judge you in any other manner other than taking your skills into account. And that's sort of hard for some students to take. You know, I would leave off any sort of political or something like that on your resume too, because you want somebody to judge you based on your skills, not based on sort of their emotional reaction to your resume. And we'll talk about that as we go through some of the sections too. Don't leave blank placeholders on your resume. So you may look at an example resume or download a template. I give you lots of resources on how to get a template. I'll show you how to get a template from Word in this video, but they often have placeholders. And some students turn their resume in with placeholders left on their resume. That's a mistake, and somebody, you know, your resume might be thrown in the trash just for leaving something that's like a huge kind of grammar or faux pas to leave a blank placeholder, like you just didn't bother to delete that. So don't do that. Make sure you have correct spelling and grammar on this rough draft. So I don't tend to take off points for spelling and grammar unless you have a lot of spelling errors that were just quite frankly ignored. So make sure that you correct that. In your final draft, I will take off points for incorrect spelling and grammar, so you might as well correct them now. If you have questions about, you know, when to capitalize something, which is often a question, you could certainly Google that, right? There's lots of grammar editing websites out there that are really great, that are better than I am, but you can also check with me. Shoot me an email, ask me what I think. Have good formatting, so have consistent formatting. And we'll talk about consistent formatting throughout this video too. So make sure that you can look down your resume, and as somebody spends 10 to 20 seconds reading your resume, it's easy to find because your resume, it has good formatting to it. And again, we'll talk about the specifics of that. Remove any pictures of yourself. So remember when I said you should take your high school diploma off, and I kind of went on a tangent about making sure that you don't put anything on your resume that allows somebody to judge you other than your skills that you're putting out there? Well, sometimes a picture can do that. And there could be things in the background of your picture. There could be something about your picture that allows somebody looking at your resume to judge you, whether they think they are or not. So it's sort of considered anymore to be a little bit of a faux pas to have pictures of yourself on your resume. Now, a social media account is a little bit different on having a picture of yourself. A professional looking picture on, for example, your LinkedIn account is considered a great way to present yourself to a potential employer. And that may seem like just the opposite thing of what I just said, but a resume is really considered a document to indicate your skills and abilities that you're able to contribute to that company. And you really want to make sure that you can identify those things instead of sort of taking up space on your resume. And I'll talk a lot about that, and you'll hear a lot about that when I give you some feedback. Think about your resume as real estate for selling yourself, for selling your skills. And when you take up that real estate by putting a picture of yourself on there, it sort of does your skills somewhat of a disservice. It means something might have to be left off. So just another reason to take off pictures. Take off any kind of special formatting too. So some templates have like your initials in a circle at the top of your resume or something like that. And that tends to look actually professional, and I don't mind seeing that, and that's just fine. And I'll talk about some of the example templates that are out there, and I'll sort of pick them apart for just a second, right? And I'll do that later in the video, but please note that some of these things are going to look professional to me and unprofessional to me, whereas very different things are going to look professional to you and unprofessional to you. So I'm not a stickler. You're not going to get points off for, leaving some formatting like initials in a circle at the top of your resume. But if it means your resume is on 2 pages, that may be something you need to rethink. You also need to have professional email addresses and social media account information on your resume. So a lot of you will have a LinkedIn account listed on your resume, and I think that's a great idea. I also think you should absolutely have an email address that you are going to check on your resume, but that should be a professional email address. So it shouldn't be, I'm really gross at gmail.com or I'm the bomb at gmail.com. That probably makes me sound really old, and I am, so that's okay. But you kind of get it, right? It should be a professional email address, something maybe with your name in it, or, some people have things like itstudent at gmail.com. Some people put their Madison College email address on there. I think either of those would be just fine. But things that look unprofessional should be left off your resume. Those emails are fine to have for your friends and things that you check, but leave them off of an email. The other thing to consider is having an email address that, whether it's true or not, has numbers in it that look like the year you were born or your month and day of your birthday. So if you have an email address like your name, 2005 at gmail.com, that looks like it's giving somebody your date of birth. And just like, it's along the lines of including your high school diploma information and that somebody now knows how old you are. But that may be true. You might have just picked 2005 because maybe that's when you got the email address. But for some, especially IT professionals, they're going to say that's when that person was born. And I don't want to hire them because they should know better as an IT person than giving away information about themselves using an email address. So you just wouldn't want to do that, and you want to make sure that you're sort of using good security practices when you have information that you put out there. Then your social media accounts, and we talk about this in the social media unit that you'll have later, but you will want to have your LinkedIn account, if you have one now, on your resume. That's important, but just make sure that it was created, and LinkedIn should be, an appropriate name, under an appropriate name and email address and everything. But if it wasn't, then simply create a new one that puts your professional image as an Madison College now graduating IT student out there. So kind of a long-winded what your resume really should look like. These are sort of the general rules to follow when you're creating any resume, whether it's for me or not. All right, so let's talk about some of the sections. And I'm going to use this super generic kind of old school resume just to sort of go through, I shouldn't say old school resume. We're going to talk about what a functional resume is, because a lot of you are going to use a functional resume, and I'm just going to go through an example one, but it's sort of old school. I'm guessing this template was developed quite some time ago because it has the word telephone on it. But let's sort of talk about this top section. So when I look at a resume and when I see a student sort of struggling to keep it on one page, I usually look at how much space your name, your information, and whether or not you have an objective statement and how much space that's taking up. So you can see this is taking up about 1.5 inches-ish of the page, and that's not too bad. But there's some templates out there that take up a lot of space. So I'm just going to talk about that really quick. And this template's going to drive me nuts because these are all sort of these little placeholders. But some templates will have you sort of, you know, put your information like I just sort of reformat it. And this looks kind of nice, right? Some people might look at it and go, oh, it kind of calls out your information. It's easy to find your telephone number, your phone number, and your email address. And then, over here you might put your LinkedIn account. But look at now, I'm taking up another full inch on my page, and it might, now you might need to sort of eliminate some of your experience section to keep it on one page, or it might spill onto 2 pages and things like that. So there's a lot of times there's things that you can do to sort of clean that up. So I picked this template to just kind of highlight that it's simple and it doesn't take up a ton of information. So you can see if there was a graphic up here of some kind, again, it's going to push everything down. And sometimes you can do that and sometimes you cannot. So at the top, you want to include your name. And this is another way I can tell this is sort of old school, is that it has your address, city, state, and zip code. Like you should put your full address, city, state, and zip code. And that's sort of considered unnecessary. You certainly can put your full address, but some people say it gives away some, again, identifying information about yourself that allows some organizations that you may be applying to say, hey, they live too far away, and they can sort of make that judgment call for you. Maybe you're applying to a company that is 1 hour away from you, and you're perfectly okay with that commute because maybe you used to live in a big city and an hour commute is nothing to you. Or maybe you like that, things like that. Or maybe you plan on moving. That's just not something that you can convey on your resume, but you want to give somebody your current address. So what a lot of people do is simply put maybe just their city and state, or they leave this information off altogether. It's just not necessary. There is no reason why somebody needs that information. And if they do need that information, they're going to have you fill out some document that's like an application, and they can gather that information at that time. Most importantly, you're going to put your contact information though. So you want your phone number and you want your email address up there. So you can just certainly, throw in your phone number, throw in your email. And then if you have a LinkedIn account, make sure that you include that too. Then this objective statement. So sometimes that's called a summary. Sometimes we don't put a title on that at all. Oftentimes it's not bulleted either. So I would actually take the bulleted list out of there. That looks kind of goofy. You could leave it in there. It's totally up to you. Things that I say look goofy to me that's sort of my opinion. But you don't have to have an objective statement. Some people leave that off anymore. And that's really acceptable, especially if here you have your education section. All right, here we go. I know exactly what you're sort of looking for. Let's say your major is the cloud program. Okay, well then I know you're going to look for cloud jobs, and that's where you're coming from. But some people like to have an objective or sort of what's called a branding statement to sort of call out the type of person that they want to be sort of perceived as, where you're, a recent graduate of the cloud program looking to start a new career, maybe even at XYZ company to apply the skills that you've learned in your program. Something simple like that. What you want to make sure is that this does not become wordy. It should be really kept to 2 sentences and 2 short sentences to boot. So just make sure that that's short and sweet, and always keep in mind as you do your resume that you seriously have roughly 10 to 15 seconds for somebody to read your resume. So you would spend all this time coming up with an objective statement that somebody might skip over. So that said, that's kind of rough. So now let's talk about where I was before, which is the education section. Before that, I want to call out that this is a functional resume, and you may not have seen a functional resume before. And I go over a functional resume in this video because most of you have seen a non-functional resume, where at the top we list our experience, and then after that, in chronological order, is what our experience is listed in. And then after that, we would list our education and maybe some additional skills that we want the company to know about. You're only going to use a chronological resume if you've actually had IT experience that pertains to the job that you want to apply for. So the job that you got in week 1 of this class. So if it doesn't, then you're going to want to use a functional resume. And what a functional resume does is it allows you to sort of list your education and then skills and abilities that call those things out. They highlight those things, and it notes a change in career. You know, whether you went to Madison College and got an IT degree right out of high school, or you're coming back from working in a different industry and, you know, you have some experience, but it doesn't pertain to IT at all. So you're able to sort of really get to the meat of who you want to be in the future, rather than having to sort of somebody go through your experience first. So that's why we do a functional resume. Other people that do a functional resume sometimes want to hide some unique experience. I shouldn't say hide, that's kind of the wrong word, but sort of find a way to highlight experiences that they've had, but maybe you have a large gap in employment, or for whatever reason you want to de-emphasize that experience. So that this is a functional resume. So you're going to put your education up at the top, and I'm going to use another example of a resume. And here, this is actually a resume that a student did, and this was his final resume, and he gave me permission to use this example resume. So he's I think a web developer student that I had years ago, and he, obviously you can see that he graduated in May 2021. But I want to show you sort of the formatting to use for the education section. So you want to put your most recent degree first. So I should see Madison College at the top, unless some of you may also be going to another school at the same time, and that's more recent or something like that. But your the title of your degree is an associate's degree in, and then whatever that degree program is. This one is web software development, but maybe yours is system administration, or the DevOps, cloud DevOps program, or whatever it may be. And then you can simply tab over, and unless you've already graduated, which you haven't because you're in this class, you put expected graduation date. And you can put it just like this. And your formatting may be slightly different than this, and that's perfectly fine, but this is sort of how you want to format and give people information. So some people put expected graduation date on the next line. They don't put it on the right-hand side, and that's perfectly fine too. And then you're going to put where that is. So this person, noted that MATC is our sort of known nickname, but you don't necessarily need to put that. Some people just put Madison College, and I think that's just fine too. I would not recommend just putting MATC, because a lot of people know that MATC can mean Madison Area Technical College, and it can also mean Milwaukee Area Technical College. So I would either put Madison College or Madison Area Technical College, and then some people choose to include the city and state. I think that's pretty optional. And then you can see this person had another degree from California, and they format that exactly the same, but it's in further in the past, so they list that second. So that's your education section, and you just want to make sure that you include sort of everything that I list here. The other one is make sure that you only include certificates that you've actually obtained, not the ones that you plan on getting. So you only want to list a certificate when you get it. So when you have it in your hand, you've completed that certification exam, and it's final, so that you can prove that you got it. So in system administration, A+ certification is very popular, and or I should say very common, and you should not put that if you took the class and plan on taking the certificate, sitting for the certification exam. You should only put it when you actually passed that exam. So that's important to note. All right, so let's talk quickly about the skills section. So the skills section, and I liked sort of this layout because it's a little bit different than the skills section that you see laid out here. And I see sort of both formats, and I see some other unique formats that I think are just fine too. But these are two formats that I think could pertain to most students in this class, whether you're doing a functional resume or sort of a chronological resume. I think they're fine. So this skills section that you see on your screen here is really common, where you're simply listing your skills under a skills section, and it's in a bulleted list. And let me just say that I'm a big fan of a bulleted list. I like to see bulleted lists that are lined up both in the bullets and the text. And if you find yourself, and you can see that it's really easy to see the beginning of sentences and where things are in a resume because you don't have very long to convey that information to a potential employer. So what you're going to do, and you might think, well, this is like 2 columns here, right? This isn't a table. So, excuse me, some students can, you have a template where you have a table under your skills section, and it does that for you. So, and that's one way to get your skills section in 2 columns easily, is to insert a table. The other way is it's pretty simple. And I just like to take a second to tell students sort of how to do that. So I am going to put this in 1 column, just so you can see how to do that. So what you're going to do is, at first, your skills section is going to look like this, and you're not going to worry about what it does to the formatting. You know, in this instance, it pushes this person's resume to 2 pages. That's okay. And you might have like 5 other things that you want to list here. And I'm actually going to take this out because I'm going to talk about the Microsoft Office skill in a second. But so you're going to list all of your skills down the page like this person has. And this person has some soft skills and some direct web software developer skills. I like to see more technical skills under the skills section than soft skills. I usually tell students to don't think about listing more than 2 to 3 soft skills. And I don't consider another language as a soft skill. I consider that a technical skill, and I think most people would consider that a technical skill. So, and the reason for that is your resume it really has to be designed to convey the message that you have the IT technical skills to perform a job. That's important on an IT resume. So put those soft skills, those are really important to employers, but make sure that you really have all of the skills that you can think of, and I'll tell you about that in a second. So then once you have those all listed, all you have to do is select all of them in that bulleted list, go to Layout in Word, go to Columns, and then go to how many of our columns you want it to be. You know, if these are short little lists and you want to pick 3 columns, you could certainly do that, and you can see what that does to this person's. This person has kind of more wordy information under his skills, so he would really want to keep it so that that generally is not wrapping to the next line. So, but you can see that's not very hard. You just want to make sure that you highlight all of your bullet points, and you're able to do that. Every once in a while, you got to clean up an extra return or something like that, but this works pretty well. Then in our other example, you can see they sort of put headings, and then you might list the skills that pertain to those headings. What I don't want to see is that you break out soft skills from technical skills. So here you would have a technical skill, and then you're listing those, and then soft skills, and you're listing those, because you don't need to do that. People can clearly see the difference between those two. It would just be if you did have some of these other things, like maybe you do have management experience, and maybe you do have specific leadership, things like that, or projects that you worked on, or something like that, where you'd want to list some different skills. I don't see this often, but I have seen it a few times with students who really were able to break the skills out in not these, because this is you're not going to have, most of you aren't going to have sales skills that you want to highlight on your resume because that's not the job type that you're applying for. This looks like me more of a business and marketing type resume. So. All right, so let me talk about some of the things that you would want to include in your skills section and some that you wouldn't. So I talked about, I eliminated that Microsoft Office skill from that previous resume that I was using. So that said, so do you include Microsoft Office as a skill? So, you all know how to use Word. A lot of you know how to use Access and Excel, and you may know that extensively. Unfortunately, that is not a skill that is of high value to most IT employers. Now, if you're applying for a job where you're going to be a business or financial analyst or, something like that, a manager, something where those would be high value, or on your job description, it specifically says you need knowledge of Microsoft Office. Well, then if you do have knowledge of Microsoft Office, you're certainly going to want that on your resume. But for most IT jobs, they want to see more than that. So really specifically more than that is Microsoft Office 365 administration. So if you know how to set it up and deploy it, and you know some of the administrator settings to Microsoft Office, and you've done that in a work setting, then you can put Microsoft Office 365 administration on under your skills, and that would be really important. And what you're really going to have is you're not going to have a functional resume. You're going to have, some experience listed behind that. So that would be a little bit different. So instead, if you're like, well, that kind of leaves a blank spot in my resume. So here's sort of a guide into thinking about the skills that you have that maybe you forgot you have. So think about the classes that you have, that you had. So you can go back and look at your saved files. What did I do in that class? Look at the books that maybe, actually most of you probably don't have your books because you've returned them because they were rented. But think about, you could go through syllabus and things like that and look at the units, the modules or chapters or whatever your instructor called them, and use them as a guide. So think about what you took in your security classes. Think about what you took as a web developer, front-end developer, all of those, system administration classes. So, you have Windows administration is learned in the very first class that you take. So, think about all the units that you may have had when you took A+ hardware, all that kind of stuff. Think about the individual chapters, dig deep, and there you can find some of the skill sets that you've learned. Did you learn PowerShell? Did you learn Linux shell scripting? Did you learn just different things? So that's really where you can find how to develop your skill set into sort of meaningful words for people to use. Now, one thing I want to point out is this is on your screen and you can look at it and you can think, oh, I'm a web software developer student. I'm just going to copy this down. And a lot of you are going to have this right here on your resume when you're a web software developer student. And I can see that. You may want to break that into more bullet points, things like that. But you definitely don't want to copy word for word this. You also don't want to copy words from like a Google search that, like if you Google web software developer skills and you hit enter and you click on the first one and you sort of come up with this candid list, then someone might start recognizing that, turning that in, as a resume to a potential employer. So you don't want to copy and paste somebody else's work. All right, so on to the next section. And these next two sections are going to kind of go relatively quickly. So this one has coding projects, and this particular student had quite a few coding projects. And your heart might skip a beat right now thinking, oh my God, this is good. And it really, this is. They have good examples of some coding projects that they did. But if you don't have specific projects, it's not expected from an employer that you would have actual examples of work right on your resume that they can click on and go to, or that your resume is inferior in some way because you don't have some sort of projects. But if you do have projects, maybe there's a website that they can go to, a GitHub site that has examples of your work that you did either for class or on the side or just because that's what you'd like to do in your spare time, then certainly put that on your resume in a link. Some students, especially infrastructure students that don't code and don't often have things on GitHub or a repository of, an online repository or sharing site, they put information here about projects that they're particularly proud of that you worked on in different classes. And it's just a short description of that project. But leave this whole thing off if you just don't have that. And I would say 85% of students that I have seen their resumes do not have coding projects or projects of any kind on their resume. So don't worry about that if you just need to take it off. Then lastly, you'll have work experience. So this is a functional resume, and you can see they have various retail and customer service experience from, and this one was April 2011 to current. So because it's current, everything is in present tense. And it just gives a quick, short, bulleted list of just things that they did to indicate what they've done, that they've had a job. So clearly they worked as, probably a bartender and things like that. And this is a little vague. And really this is for people who have had, more than 3 jobs and very little space on their resume to highlight their work experience. So for example, if you don't have any projects, and you have 2 to 3 jobs in customer service, I would list them out. They're going to go last. Work experience is still going to be listed last, but I would list them out. And let me just bump back to how you can list that. So this experience, in this format is, your job title, what company it was for, and then the dates. And it should be chronological, so it should be the most recent job first to the least recent job first. And then in a bulleted list, you list you could use one bullet and list a brief summary. So that one bullet should not be more than 2 sentences long. But if you would want to list things like it is here, like I remain calm under high stress situations, I consistently or constantly working in a team environment, or whatever you want to put here. If it's sort of short 1 sentence things, then you can list them out in a bulleted list for each job. That said, bulleted lists, unless there's sentences like you would have here where it's a brief summary, a bulleted list does not have periods after it. And then this one I would actually correct. So I don't like this remaining calm. I usually tell people to put it in direct present tense. So remain calm under high stress situations. So you don't have to say that you're continuing to remain calm under high stress situations. You just do that currently. If anything is past employment, then you want to make sure that everything is in past tense. So let me just make sure I'm not forgetting anything. I am not. So that is really sort of the long video, and hopefully this is the longest video you have to listen to this semester. But think about how you want to put your resume together. This is one of the most important documents that you do for this class. So please feel free to let me know as you work on it if you have any questions.